Hey everybody, my name is Tate Emmons, and we're excited to partner with Singing News TV to bring you a brand new series called Legends. It's 10 episodes and 10 legends. We'll have an inside look on some of the living legends of Southern gospel music. You'll hear their stories directly from them, and we might even sing a song together. So subscribe to Singing News TV and check out Legends today. Hey everybody, my name is Tate Emmons, and welcome to Singing News TV, where today we'll be spending time with one of the living legends of Southern gospel music. Their stories are fascinating, their songs never get old, and their contributions have been priceless. A couple of years ago, I attended the Charles Novell School of Music in Murray, Kentucky. And like we often do, my mother and I found ourselves a little turned around on campus. But lucky for us, we saw a man headed our direction and we asked for his help. Little did I know, not only was this man one of the kindest people I'd ever met, I had just become friends with a legend. On today's episode, we will relive the journey of not only a hero of mine, but a legend and a friend, Mr. Billy Blackwood. Well, Brother Billy, thank you so much for letting me be here today and be in your office. But Brother Billy, you came from Southern gospel music royalty. You are a legend from legends. And I'm only 14 years old, and I missed out on a lot of the history of the Blackwood brothers. And for us who haven't heard the whole story, tell us about the deep roots of the Blackwood brothers.
Well, thank you, Tate. It's great to have you here and great to be a part of your program today. My dad, James Blackwood, his two older brothers, Roy and Doyle, and his nephew, Roy's older son, R.W. Sr., were the original four Blackwood brothers. They started singing out in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi, and that's not a town. That's just, they were about 9 miles from the nearest town of Ackerman in Choctaw County. But they started singing in Choctaw County in 1934.
Okay.
And the four of them. And, you know, it just started like maybe in local churches, and then they got on a little local radio station in Kosciuszko. You being from Mississippi, you know some of these names.
I know exactly where that's
yeah.
at. Yes, sir.
And then they migrated to Jackson, the capital, and they were on WJDX there. And things just, you know, it seemed like things were kind of happening pretty quickly for them. We're talking now the late 30s, and 39 they were there. They went to Shreveport, Louisiana for just a short while. We're on radio there. And at that point, kind of in the late 30s, early 40s, there was a real boom of gospel groups traveling, and they were basically hired by songbook publishers. Okay. And they would learn the songs that were compiled in the songbook, and then they would go to concerts and they would sell the songbook. So it became a revenue making, you know, industry, kind of in its infancy. What we now know of is, you know, the Christian music industry basically started out of people's trunks selling songbooks. I mean, literally.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, and then soon they began to make records, and one thing led to another. But in 1940, there was a big radio station up north called KMA. It was in a little town called Shenandoah, Iowa. But in that little town was a company called the Earl May Feed and Seed Company, and it was up in the middle of farmland. And Mr. May sold feed and seed to, you know, everybody within 500 miles probably of Shenandoah. So although it was a small town, it had a big impact, and he had a local radio station, KMA Radio. Interestingly, there was a singer on that program on the radio station there in Shenandoah, whose name was Ike Everly. Okay. And he did a country radio show on that radio station. Well, he had two sons who went on to do pretty well. They were Phil and Don Everly, the Everly brothers. Mm-hmm. And my dad said when they were up there that they used to stand the boys in a chair to be able to reach the microphone. So they were just little kids starting out. But anyway, the Blackwood brothers moved there in 1940. And for the decade of the 40s, except for a couple of years during World War II, but for almost all of the 40s, they broadcast on KMA radio. They were on every morning and sometimes at noon, and then they would hop in the car and drive as far as they could get and do concerts. You know, they had a full concert schedule because they were heard on the radio every day. People would call and say, hey, can you guys come sing in our town or in our church? And so the 40s was really good to the Blackwood brothers. And it's, you know, it's kind of funny, even to this day, when we go up in that part of the country, I mean, if we're in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Omaha, or Des Moines, or Sioux Falls, or Kansas City, or anywhere up in that part of the world, there are still people who obviously would have been, you know, little kids back then, who are, you know, old now, but they remember the Blackwood brothers. And we do a concert up there, and they say, I came to see your dad sing when, you know, I was a little kid, or, you know, my mom had your records, or whatever. So the 40s was very good for them in that respect, and they just blanketed the middle section of the country, the upper plains in particular. And then in 1950, they moved back down south to Memphis. My grandparents were aging, and they wanted to be closer to them and take care of them. So they moved to Memphis. Memphis at that time was 400,000 people, so it was a good-sized city already.
Very so.
And they had quite a bit of success on radio already, so they started, soon after they got to Memphis, having a radio program there and a TV program. By that time, TV was starting to come along in the late 50s. And so, you know, they began to replicate that. It really took off. They soon decided that and saw the potential of traveling a lot further if they did it by plane. So my R.W. Blackwood and the bass singer Bill Lyles got their pilot's license, and they started flying to all of their engagements. Well, maybe not all, but a large number of their engagements, because they could, you know, they could fly in a third of the time that it would take to drive somewhere.
Right.
And do the concert and fly back home, be home that night, rather than, you know, all that distance by car. And back then there were no interstates, so, you know, to go 250 miles by car was a big deal. Anyway, so they started flying, and that proved to be very profitable for them, enabling them to travel more. In 1954, two really pivotal things happened. There was a TV program called Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. I know you're way too young to know what that was, but it was like American Idol of the 1950s.
Okay.
And they appeared on the Blackwood Brothers appeared on Mr. Godfrey's program in 1954, and they won the contest. And at the time, Mr. Godfrey's show was the most popular show on TV. There were only 3 channels back then, in the 50s, and everybody tuned in to see Godfrey's Talent Scouts. Overnight, I mean, most of America, for the first time, heard gospel quartet music. So the next day, they sang a song called Have You Talked to the Man Upstairs? Won the contest singing that. The next day, RCA rushed them into RCA studios in New York to record it, because they realized they had a hit on their hands. It was on jukeboxes around the country. So things just exploded really quickly. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, they were singing in a town in Alabama, Clanton, Alabama, and they'd flown in that day. They were going to be flying out that night after the concert. There were no light. It was not a lighted runway or a little lighted airstrip. Cars would line the airstrips and turn on their headlights facing each other so that planes could see how to, you know, land and take off. So they were preparing for the fact that it was going to be dark when they took off. And so R.W. and Bill hopped in the plane, took a spin, tried to come in and land, and something went wrong. We don't know exactly what, but the plane just went vertical and stalled and crashed and burned right there on the airfield. With my dad and the rest of the group. The Statesman Quartet were singing with them that night. They were there, and because of their success on Godfrey, just 2 weeks, this was 2 weeks before that, 2.5 weeks before, a few hundred people had already gathered at the airfield just to be there, because that's where they were going to hold the concert that night. So all those people witnessed firsthand, you know, it's like a horrible movie right in front of their eyes. And that was such a huge, R.W. and Bill were killed instantly. And R.W. was my dad's nephew, but he was more like his little brother. They were only 2 years apart in age, so they were very close. Bill Lyles was his best friend. So he lost his closest relative and his best friend, my dad did. And you know, just a horrible accident. And he stated at the time he was done. He was 35 years old, maybe, not old at all. And Bill and R.W. were like 33, 34. So they were, you know, young men in the prime of their life. They just won a national TV contest, and, you know, things were just exploding for them career-wise. And then it just all came crashing down. And my dad made the statement he was done. He couldn't go on. And God had other plans. You know, people were praying, and a lot of support came in. And I don't mean just financially, I mean just in emotional support, prayer support. And so they regrouped. My dad hired J.D. Sumner, who had been singing with the Sunshine Boys, to take Bill Lyles' place. He went on to become a huge star in gospel music, as you know.
A legend, yeah.
And wrote hundreds of gospel songs, many of which became hits for the Blackwood brothers. And R.W.'s little brother Cecil took his place, and they went on with my dad and Jack Marshall playing piano, later Wally Varner playing piano, Bill Shaw singing tenor. And they just kept climbing. It's interesting, and I've never really thought of this quite like this, but as horrible as the accident was, it just impacted the nation, because the nation knew that, 2.5 weeks before, they'd won Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. Man, they were one of the biggest things going musically, right in that period. So when the crash happened, most of the country heard about it over some kind of news feed, AP or UPI, something. They heard about it. It became a national tragedy. And so, as negative as that is, in reality, it imprinted them in people's minds. People felt like they were hurt. They hurt for them. So it was a big emotional outpouring of prayer and just care that came from, everywhere they went. It was like, we're so sorry. The funeral for them in Memphis, it was a combined funeral, was held in the downtown auditorium. They'd been doing monthly concerts there every month, but that's where the funeral was held. It was the largest funeral in the history of Memphis. Wow. Until 23 years later, when Elvis Presley died, and then his surpassed that, because his was held, his was bigger. Since then, that's been a long time ago. Group has continued to sing. There's always been a Blackwood at the helm of the group. Over the years, like in the late 40s, my two uncles retired. So it was my dad and R.W. Still family members, but they began to bring in non-family members, and we've always since then had maybe probably 75 or 80 people over the years that were not family members that have sung with the group. Great things have continued to happen, Grammy Awards and Songs of the Year, and just a lot of accolades and a lot of awards, and that's all cool. But the main thing is ministry. The one thing, and I remember a lot of things. My dad, I observed from him. He was a great singer and was awarded a lot for that. But the one thing that I really take away from his life and ministry and career is keeping the message the main thing. And he would always, I can hear him, his voice is going in my head right now, saying, if they can't understand the words, what's the point? Because gospel music is different than all other genres of music. Country music sounds like country music and classical like classical. Gospel doesn't have a musical style necessarily, because it's not the music that makes it the gospel, it's the message that makes it the gospel. And more so than in any other genre. So you can have, everything from Southern gospel to, real contemporary music. Can be completely different music styles, but they can both be gospel music because it's the message that makes it so.
Right.
So, although the times have changed and the styles have changed, we're still doing, we still travel and tour, and I have the wonderful privilege of leading the Blackwood brothers and doing what my dad did. And so we just continue to go with it as long as the Lord gives us grace to do it.
Yes, sir. Well, talking about your father, he was obviously a legend in himself. And him being your father, did you know growing up that he was a legend?
That's a great question, and I don't know that I have a great answer for you. As a kid, traveled with them in the summer when I wasn't in school. I was on the bus a lot, and it's kind of surreal, Tate, because you show up in Atlanta at the Municipal Auditorium, or in Birmingham at the downtown Boutwell Auditorium, or wherever, Fort Worth and Will Rogers Auditorium, just wherever we were. And the places were packed to see the Blackwood brothers and the Statesmen and the Spear family and the Oak Ridge Quartet and the Lefevre Trio and all those old pioneering groups. I really don't know that I can give you a great answer, because it was what my dad did, and I knew it was cool. But I don't think I really probably got that he was at the tip of the spear when it came to innovation and blazing trails. He was one of the big pioneers early on. By the time I came along, they were in their heyday. They had tremendous success, and the plane crash had happened and all that. And so my experience of him as a kid was, when he came home, my mom said he'd play as long as I'd play. He loved kids, and he loved to, have fun, and he had a really humorous side that not many people ever saw. I guess at one level I knew this is a pretty big deal, but at another level he was just my dad, and so I guess that tempered the I wasn't in awe of him, and I knew that, although I knew he was a really popular guy in the gospel music world, I don't know. It's hard, it's just hard to kind of weigh that. I'm not sure how to answer that, but that's my best shot.
Well, talking about that he was big in the gospel world, you tell that James was one of Elvis's heroes.
Yeah.
What was the connection like with Brother James and Elvis and the Blackwood brothers and Elvis?
Well, it started in 1948. Vernon and Gladys and Elvis moved to Memphis from Tupelo. In 1950, 2 years later, the Blackwood brothers moved there from Iowa. Mm-hmm. And although they'd grown up in Mississippi, they moved to Iowa in the 40s. And so in 1950, they moved to Memphis. They started attending the same church as the Presleys. And, Elvis was a truck driver, and Gladys and Vernon were poor as Job's turkey. So they didn't, they didn't really have any professional interaction. Do you like that?
Sorry, I got tickled at that. I'm trying to keep it professional, but that was fun.
Yeah,
that was funny.
You're doing great. Sometimes when the group was in town on a Sunday, the pastor would say, James, I'm glad to have you here this morning. If all the guys are here, would y'all come up and sing a song? And so, they would walk up on the platform and they'd sing a special for Sunday morning service. And we know for a fact that's where Vernon and Gladys and Elvis first heard the group. And at the same time, shortly after they moved to Memphis, after the Blackwoods moved to Memphis, they started holding concerts every month in the downtown auditorium, the Ellis Auditorium. And Vernon and Gladys lived in some housing projects about 6 blocks from the auditorium. Elvis was driving a truck. He was 16, 17, 18. Since he knew them from church, and when they started having concerts just, downtown, a few blocks from where he lived, he would walk the 6 blocks up to Ellis Auditorium to see the Blackwood brothers and whoever happened to be in concert with them, because they would bring in guest artists, the Statesmen, Spears, and other groups to sing with them. So it wasn't always just them, but they were the hosts of the event. Elvis became a huge fan, and they recognized that. They recognized this guy, he's a little different, mm-hmm. but he obviously loves this music. So that's how the relationship started. And then in 1958 or 9, I think it was, Gladys passed away. And she made no bones about it that the Blackwood brothers were her favorite group. And so when she died, Elvis and Vernon, they chartered a plane to come pick up the Blackwood brothers. I think they were in North Carolina, and fly them back to Memphis to sing for Gladys's funeral. There was this really deep emotional, connection with them. When I was your age, you're 15. I know you're 14 today, but tomorrow you're going to be 15. That probably messes up the whole timeline here. But anyway,
it's all right.
When I was 15, I was your age, and my dad would often get a call from Elvis. He'd hang up the phone. I'd be home. We'd be there in the den watching TV or something. The phone would ring. He'd answer it. And a lot of times he'd say, that was Elvis, and he wants me to call the guys and go out to Graceland and sing. He's dying to sing some quartet music, because he loved that music. And so that was not an uncommon thing. He would call a few times a year, and they would, if provided they were all in town, they'd go out and sing. So this one time, I was 15, phone rang, my daddy hangs up, and says, that was Elvis. It was 1968. He said, he wants me to go out and meet his little girl, Lisa. You want to go with me? And I said, sure. So we hopped in the car. Drove out to Graceland. We go in the foyer and we're standing there, and Elvis comes down the steps from the second floor holding Lisa in his arms. She was a baby. And so at one point he says, well, Mr. Blackwood, I just want to introduce you to my little girl. This is Lisa. And he looked at her and said, Lisa, this is Mr. Blackwood, one of my heroes.
Wow.
I mean, we don't think about people like Elvis, or the Beatles. Somebody influenced them to be who they were. When Elvis passed away, my dad sang at his funeral. And then just a few years ago, when Lisa Marie passed away, Graceland called, and the person in charge of arranging all of that said, you guys have been such a part of this family's life. Can you come and sing for Lisa's funeral? So we did, and we're honored to do that. And to this day, in fact, we sing at Graceland usually once or twice a year. They have us down for special events, and it's a great opportunity. Because most of the people that come to Graceland, even for a gospel event, they know that Elvis loved gospel music. They know he did gospel music. They know that he had a lot of gospel influences, but a lot of them are not necessarily believers. So when we go down there and do those things, it's probably the most unchurched group we sing to all year, and we get to sing the gospel to people who are coming just because they're fans.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, there's this picture behind me. I don't know if you can see that, but it says, thanks for everything, Elvis Presley. I think that was in my dad's collection. I think what they did was send those to people for Christmas one year, and so I ended up with it. So that's what the Elvis picture is from.
How about this, Brother Billy? We're going to take a quick break. Stay right where you are, and we'll be right back with this episode of Legends.
The Hopper Heritage Foundation has been awarding scholarships for more than 2 decades, helping to further the education of future Christian leaders, whether music, teaching, missions. The scope is vast, and the potential is yours. To learn more, visit thehopperheritagefoundation.org and submit your application today. Dreaming of an unforgettable getaway filled with music, faith, and breathtaking ocean views? Join Tate Emmons aboard the Harmony at Sea 2026 cruise. Setting sail February 23rd through the 28th on the Carnival Freedom. We're heading to Celebration Key, Nassau, and the stunning Half Moon Cay. A trip that's part paradise, part praise, and all unforgettable. Alongside Tate Emmons, enjoy the Browders, the Allens, Right Road Quartet, Danny Funderburg, Heart to Heart, the Seiler family, and more. Be sure to register with Tate Emmons so you can be part of his special onboard events and exclusive experiences. Expect live concerts, powerful worship, artist meet and greets, and plenty of fun at sea. Whether you're soaking up the sun or singing under the stars, this is a trip you don't want to miss. Cabins are limited, so book now. Visit www.praise.events or call 865-278-3681 and sign up with Tate Emmons to set sail for a week of music, inspiration, and adventure. Harmony at Sea 2026, where faith, music, and fun come together.
Hey, I'm Rob Novell with the Charles Novell School of Music. I wanted to take just a second to let you know about the Charles Novell School of Music, or as we call it, CNS. For over 6 years, CNS has been training musicians, singers, songwriters to be the best that they can be. We believe this way at CNS. Our talents are God's gift to us, but what we do with them, that's our gift back to Him. So the Bible says in 2 Timothy, study to show thyself approved. So CNS, we want to help you be the best that you can be unto the Lord. Who is CNS for? Man, let's start with Tate Emmons. This young man has a call in his life to serve God through the gifts of his music. So CNS is for young people like that. CNS, you all, is for anybody. It's also for the alto on the second row of the church choir that just wants to do what they do for the Lord, again, to the best of their ability. What do we offer at CNS? Man, we teach voice, piano, guitar, songwriting, sound systems, technology. Golly, what don't we do? We cover every aspect. We also get into some of the back-end things of the industry, from promotions and booking, that type of things. So CNS is for anybody and everybody, small to tall. We've had 5-year-olds, we've had 82-year-olds attend CNS. How can you find out about CNS? Man, you can visit us online at www.cnsmusic for more information. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Tate Emmons and welcome back to Legends, and today we have Brother Billy Blackwood with us. Now, we talked about your daddy's and the group's connection with Elvis. Now, do you have any personal stories or working with Elvis?
You know, I was around him when I was a kid. He'd come to the concerts there in Memphis, and then when, he asked my dad to come out and meet Lisa Marie, and I went with him. So, I'd been around him as a kid. But I was playing drums with the Blackwood brothers when I was a teenager, up till about the time I was 20. And I decided to leave the group, didn't really know what I was going to do. But Donnie Sumner, who's JD's nephew, had sung with the Stamps when they backed up Elvis. Well, he left the show, formed his own group, vocal group, and they were doing some session work here in Nashville. And Elvis wanted to hear them. And so he flew them out to Las Vegas, one of his stints there, and wanted them to audition for Tom Jones. He loved gospel male groups, and so he thought every entertainer needed a group like that to back them up. And so he flew the guys out there to interview, or actually for a job with Tom Jones. And so one night at the suite, after Elvis's show, Tom was there, and he had the guys sing, and Tom said, "Man, you guys are great. I just don't really have a place for them on my program." Mm-hmm. And so Elvis was, maybe a little disappointed, but he said, "You know what? I like you guys so much, I'm going to hire you just to sing for me." Well, then within a couple of months, he said, "I want everybody to hear you." So he hired them to be one of the opening acts on the show. And as it happened, that's when I was leaving the Blackwood Brothers. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just felt like my time there was done. So I ran into Donnie at the National Quartet Convention, and I said, "Hey man, I hear you just got the job opening Elvis' show." He said, "Yeah, we're going to need a band. Would you like a job?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." So joined their band, and we opened shows for him in Las Vegas and Lake Tahoe, and on tour for a couple of years. And you know, there's in A Tale of Two Cities, there's an opening line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and that aptly fits my experience there. It was the most exciting thing you could be a part of. You know, it's Elvis Presley, man. You know, he was at the top of his game. Arenas filled with people, coliseums filled with people. You know, just crazy pandemonium excitement. And even though they didn't know us from Adam, and it didn't matter, we were one of the opening acts on the show. So it was a fun, exciting deal. But on the other hand, it was just not at all what I was ready for. I was completely unprepared for the negative side of all of that. And I would love to tell you that, you know, I was a perfect model Christian through all that, but unfortunately that was not the case. I have a lot of regret about that. I had sometimes, you know, even one-on-one with Elvis, or even a small group with him at one of his homes, because he would often, in between shows, he would fly the whole band out to LA just to hang out in his house in Los Angeles or in Palm Springs, just because he wanted to hear the guys sing. And we went along just because we were part of the group. I mean, you know, it was crazy. But I had opportunity to really say something, you know, or be something, and I didn't really fulfill that. And, you know, I will always regret that. But all that being said, I know that Elvis knew about the Lord. I knew he grew up at our home church. I mean, he had an understanding. He obviously didn't walk in a scriptural obedience to God, but I really want to believe, and I do believe, that as he was dying, he cried out to the Lord. You know, we have the biblical example of the thief on the cross. He certainly didn't live a life, you know, pleasing to God, as far as we know. You know, he was a thief. He was hanging on a cross next to Jesus because he had done something, you know, to get him there. And Jesus told him, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," because the thief on the cross expressed his faith in who Jesus was. When he said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." In other words, I get who you really are. And I know this is not the end for you. Remember me. So we have that, you know, we classically call it a deathbed confession, but we have that example in Scripture. I believe Elvis had that. I know he had the opportunity, and I can't imagine him in the way that he died, the time period that it was, that he didn't take advantage of what he knew to be true.
So we've talked about your times with Elvis, and we've talked about your times with the Blackwood Brothers, but now I want to talk about you. Not only are you an amazing singer, you are a very accomplished songwriter. Have you been writing songs all of your life?
Pretty much. I remember one of the first songs I ever wrote. I was a teenager, and I was on the Stamps bus, and Donnie Sumner, I didn't think the song was anything. I crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage, literally. And Donnie saw that. I didn't know he saw that, but he saw it, and he got the piece of paper out and unfolded it, you know, uncrinkled it, whatever, and read it. And he, in a short while, I mean, just within a few minutes, he brought it to me and handed it to me. He said, "Don't ever throw away something this good again." And
so it was good.
And he was a songwriter, so I took that. Whether it was a good song or not, I don't know. But if it might have just been an act of encouragement. But he said next time, or something like, "Next time you throw a song this good away, I'm going to get it out and claim I wrote it," or, you know, something just really encouraging. But I've always written, still write. I have songs in the making, and, you know, in various stages of completion. I had a song the Kingsmen did last year. I carried around this lyric in my songs folder for years. I mean, literally 20 years. And the lyric was, I'm a part of the church of the great I am, washed in the blood of the risen Lamb, with a home in heaven, with a home in a place called the Promised Land. I'm a part of the church of the great I am. Just had that little verse written down, little chorus. So I was going into, I called Kenna West, who Kenna's dad, Ken Turner, sang bass with the Blackwood brothers back in the day. When I played drums with him, he was a bass singer. So I've known Kenna since she was a little girl. And I called Kenna, who's an incredible songwriter, and I said, "Hey, I've got this idea, and so let's go write." So we did, and we finished the verses with Jason Cox, her friend and songwriting friend, and so we recorded, put it out. The Kingsman recorded it, went to #2. It didn't quite make #1, it made #2.
That #2 is still a great accomplishment.
That's something to be glad about. So I still write, and some songs are more personal. Some songs are just like that, more catchy. But I love to write. I guess I'll write till I die, because I've got way too many songs in the hopper to stop.
Well, look, I know this will be incredibly difficult to say because I'm a songwriter myself, and I can't tell you I can pick a favorite song I've written, but if you look over all of your songs, do you have a favorite song you've written?
I have a few. One, probably the latest one that I feel like is a life-changing kind of song. It's called "Live Today." And you don't know this, and I hope you never know this, but in life you make mistakes, and some of them can be inconsequential, some of them can be very consequential. And very few people live their whole lives without stumbling and falling at some point. And again, I hope you're one of the exceptions, but so it's kind of a personal testimony. It says, there's not one of us who makes it through this life without regret. Things we wish we'd done, things we've done, we wish we could forget. Though there's nothing we can do to change one moment of the past, tomorrow's past is what we do today.
Yes, sir.
So live today. It's a gift God's given you, and there's no time like the present. Give today. Give what God has given you. You'll find your life when you give it away. Live today.
Wow, that's powerful.
Well, I think it is, and I don't say that because I wrote it, but I say that because I think God's going to use that to encourage people. Again, almost everybody stumbles at some point or falls or wishes they could have a do-over on things.
Right.
That kind of song says, don't quit, don't give up. The past, you can't change the past, but you can change the future, by choosing what you do today.
Well, you obviously are a very knowledgeable songwriter, and you share that knowledge at your role at the Charles Novell School of Music, and that's actually where we met. And we have a funny story about that, and I tell that in the intro. But what is your role at the Charles Novell School of Music? Tell us about the Charles Novell School of Music in general.
Well, in the early 60s, Charles Novell was an incredible pianist, young man who had graduated from the Conservatory of Cincinnati, just crazy talented. And my dad found out about Charles and hired him to teach in the Blackwoods Music School. And I think I mentioned earlier in the program that my dad and J.D. Sumner bought the Stamps Quartet Music Company. Well, they inherited the Stamps School of Music with it, and so they kept the school running. And my dad hired Charles to be on staff as the dean of the pianists. And then over the years, things changed, ownership hands and things like that. Charles ended up with a school. They chose him to carry it on. And so he did for many, many years. And his son, Rob, now Charles passed away, and Rob Novell carries on the Charles Novell School of Music. And so I've really been a part of it since I was your age, literally again. And have known Rob since he was a little kid. And I wear several hats. I do songwriting, I do kind of a performance critique of do's and don'ts on stage. Tara and I do a worship track where we talk about the dynamics of worship music and how to do that, how to fit that into a church music program. And I do some guitar lessons and some drum lessons occasionally, and I'm kind of the utility ball guy. I play whatever position is open and they need somebody to jump in. Kind of, there to help wherever I can.
Well, Brother Billy, like you said earlier, you're still carrying on the legacy of the Blackwood brothers. And y'all were still going on, and y'all were still very successful. Just to go to prove that, your latest album, Tribute to the King, was just nominated for a Grammy. How about that?
It was kind of a mind blower. You know, we hadn't really planned to do that project. I was talking with our record company at Day Win about what we might do next, and we'd kind of finished our meeting. We'd been meeting about an hour and just talking about possibilities, and we got ready to leave, and I said, you know, Graceland still has us down every year, and we have this real connection with the Presley family. Maybe we should do a project of Elvis gospel songs. And they're like, duh, why did I think of that? So we did, and had no idea that it was going to take off like it did, and was nominated for a Grammy last year. So that was out of nowhere, a real surprise, pleasant surprise.
Throughout the whole course of the Blackwood Brothers, y'all have had a lot of success, and I just want to name a couple accolades. The Blackwood Brothers has had over 200 albums. Y'all sold over 50 million records. Y'all have had 8 Grammys, I think I'm right on that, and 6 Dove Awards. That's, I don't even know what to say about that. That's wonderful.
Well, God has blessed what we do. You know, I hadn't thought of this until this moment, but I say in concert sometimes, you know, I'll ask people to pray for us as we travel, so that we will, you know, be anointed, that God will use us to touch people's hearts. And I will make the statement, you know, my grandmother Blackwood was famous for being a prayer warrior. She was 4 feet 9 inches tall, but she was a mighty woman of God. And she's been gone like 60 years. But God's still answering her prayers for her sons, who are now all gone, but her grandson, who she didn't even really know that much. You know, our lives barely crossed paths. But God's still answering her prayers. And I think that's why we are still going at 91 years now, you know, because God's faithful.
Well, Brother Billy, the Blackwood name has more weight and history than most others. Your family and your dad would be proud of how you've honored the traditions, honored the music, and you've honored the Lord. And today, we honor you.
Thank you, Tate. The honor is mine to get to be with you. And I'm excited about what God's doing in your life.
Well, thank you, Brother Billy. But look, how about this? Before I go, let's sing one together.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be His than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by His nail-pierced hands than to be a king of a vast domain and be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today.
I'd rather have Jesus than men's applause. I'd rather be faithful to His dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to His holy name
than to
be a king
of a vast domain and be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. This world affords today.
Well, Brother Billy, we have the honor to interview you today in your office, and you have a lot of cool things on the wall. Tell us about some of these things.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in here that, you know, it's basically a music career. Starting up here, that's a gold video award from the Gaither organization to my dad for the original Homecoming videos, or one of them.
Wow.
This is actually a signed picture by all the guys. This is about 1961 or 2. We've got all the Blackwood brothers on there. This one is when we were inducted into the Memphis Music Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And it's kind of cool. Johnny Cash was in the same year, and a lot of Memphis people. This lady right here, a lot of people may not remember her name, but Kay Starr, she was a big band singer. Mm-hmm. She actually had the recording of a song, Have You Talked to the Man Upstairs, that the Blackwoods learned to sing on the Arthur Godfrey show. So they borrowed that song from Kay Starr, but she was inducted. She was from Memphis and was inducted into the Memphis Music Hall of Fame the same year we were. And this is kind of a random piece here.
I was looking at that earlier. Now tell us about this.
Well, it says, to my friend James Blackwood, signed Stan Lee.
The famous comic.
The famous comic book,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And all these people, you know, Iron Man and
Hulk
and all those. He created all the, drew all those. But he was apparently a fan of my dad's. We didn't know.
So there was no personal relationship.
Not
there.
as far as we know, but he was, I guess, just sending out these to people he wanted to honor and autograph one to my dad, which
Wow.
I think is pretty cool. My dad probably didn't know that much about it. I thought, whoa, that's cool. That's really good.
Hey everybody, my name is Tate Emmons, and thank you for watching this episode of Legends, a series where we honor the generations that came before us and paved the way. But I'd like to speak about a generation who has not had the chance to pave their way. A generation stolen, sold, and abused. Over 1 million children have been abducted and are being used for sexual exploitation and slavery. Just as young as 18 months old, but on average, just 15 years old. That's my age. It's a $99 billion industry generated by stolen children each year. It's a tragic epidemic that can no longer be ignored or overlooked. Over 1 million children's voices have been silenced. But today, I will be their voice, the voice of my generation. I will make the appeal of hope and rescue. Destiny's Rescue is an organization missioned to rescue kids from human trafficking, to set them free and keep them free. Today we are announcing a partnership with Destiny's Rescue and Tate Emmons Ministries, and we're asking you to partner with us. For a monthly commitment only $40 or any gift that you can give, you will become actively in the fight to save these children's lives. And as a way of saying thank you, I'll send you my debut album, Means Something to Me, along with Christmas with Tate, as our gift to you. By following the QR code at the bottom of the screen or going to tateemmons.com, you can become an official partner. A partner to save a stolen generation whose voices have been silenced. Let's be their voice. Let's stand in the gap for my generation.